Principal Matters Podcast, episode 487. Hi, friends. This is Will Parker back with my co-host, Dr. Jen Schwanke, for another Principal Matters. And Jen, this week's guest is Paul Branagan. He is a veteran leader who has so much experience in student council, and I just can't wait for leaders to get to know him. But before we do that, we always begin with our question and answer session. And we had a question from a listener recently that was saying, I'm struggling with how to best reach our teachers with clear communication. What systems help with clarity or consistency without depending on a single channel of communication? So we only usually do 5 minutes here, Jen. I think we could probably go longer with this, but what are some thoughts you have on clear communication?
Well, I think the answer is embedded in the question here. The question was, what systems can help with clarity and consistency? I would say systems, clarity, and consistency. You got to have a system that you stick with all the time. So if you send a Friday newsletter, send it every Friday at about the same time. Don't put gobbledygook in there. Just be very, very clear and be consistent, right? With the things that you put in your communication, be consistent so they always know where to find it. I also, little hint, anything you send should be archived somewhere, whether it's a Google Doc with all the newsletters kind of added on there so people can do an open Apple find or whatever, so they can find a topic. They should be archived for ease. And then I think I assume you'll talk a little bit about in-person communication too, because I think that's...
Yeah, no, this is such a great question, because I think there are certain things that are good for you to put in writing, and those come out in newsletters. Those can come out weekly, bi-monthly, however you want to do it. But I love it that you already said, be consistent, use a template that makes it expected what you're going to be talking about each time that you're sharing those things out. I love it. We used to have a place on our website where you could look at old newsletters too, so archive those things. And I'll add to this before I talk about in person. Don't be afraid to duplicate information across channels. So if you've got a great newsletter, but there's some pieces in there that could also go out in social media, there's some pieces on there that could also go out in one of the, I know some schools use specific apps for communicating directly with teachers, not with students. So, but I just think it's important that to refrain as much as possible from the one blast that somebody told you something everybody needs to know, so I'm just going to blast it out right now. That just ends up creating so many messages within emails that's why teachers stop reading them. And so if they know that you're going to try to collect all the most important information and send it out weekly, they'll look for that. Now, occasionally there's something you can't avoid. But that's where I would say those situations that you can't avoid, it might be a good idea at that point to include that in a morning announcement. Or if it's possible, and I know this is different on the size of every school, but so often, first ask yourself, is this information I could wait till the next time we're face-to-face to share? Or are there people I can just go tell in person this information, that it doesn't need to go out to everyone as an email or a document? Either, I think sometimes we do the lazy thing, and I'm just speaking to my old practices, but also things I had to learn to refine. It's just like, well, I'm thinking it, let me shoot it out. And so it's off my mind and off my list, but that may not be the most effective way to communicate.
Right.
I don't know, Jen, that's 5 minutes of quick feedback, but
yeah. No, I think it's, this is a constant wrestling match with a lot of principals there, because here's the thing, you can do all of the ideas that Will and I threw out and then some, and you're still going to have people who don't read the newsletter. They're still going to say, I didn't know. You're still going to think, how can I get better at this? So it is something that we're constantly refining. And, just think, it wasn't too long ago that the principal communicated with notes that were slipped into mailboxes, and those notes were on a pink piece of while you were out paper. So we'll evolve, we'll change, and we can always get better.
Well, shameless plug. I wrote my second book on messaging matters, how to inspire students, motivate teachers, and reach communities. And there's a lot of nuggets in there of different ways you can focus your communication. At the end of the day, it all comes back to relationships. The way you communicate is also the way you want to build relationships too. So you're building trust through the way you communicate. So Jen, thank you for doing this Q&A with us. Principal Matters listeners, I know you're going to love this week's guest. Jen, until next time, how can folks stay connected with you and your resources?
Yep. Find me at jenschwanke.com. You can subscribe to my newsletter there or shoot me an email.
Thanks, Jen. Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. Why is IXL used in 95 of the top 100 U.S. school districts? Because it works. Research across 45 states shows that IXL schools outperform other schools on state tests. With IXL, you get a personalized online learning and teaching solution that helps you improve achievement, empower teachers, track progress, and more. This one platform for K-12 helps teachers accomplish what normally would require dozens of other tools. For example, as students practice skills, IXL automatically adapts to ensure each learner is always supported and challenged at the right level. IXL also provides every student with a personalized learning plan to help them close knowledge gaps effectively. One of my favorite things about IXL is their personalized test prep tool. For exams like the SAT and ACT, IXL will analyze a student's most recent score and generate a custom list of skills to help them boost their scores. If you want to take the load off your teachers so they can do their best work, IXL can help. Learn more at IXL.com/PM.
You're listening to Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast.
Hi, friends. This is Will Parker, host of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast, where each week we bring you inspiring, innovative, and imaginative ideas for your own school leadership. And this week I'm on with my special guest, Paul Branagan. Paul Branagan is the very proud principal of Middleborough High School in Middleborough, Massachusetts. He has served the students of Middleborough for the last 29 years. He served in the role of history teacher, department leader for history and social studies, assistant principal. He's in his 14th year as principal, and in his role, he calls this his favorite position. He's also the state executive director for the Massachusetts Association of Student Councils since 2010. And Paul works with high schools throughout the Commonwealth, helping their student councils and leadership programs. He was named the 2011 National Student Council Advisor of the Year and was honored with the 2022 Earl Reum Award, which is a national award celebrating excellence in student activities. And Paul, I'll give some more background here in just a moment, but welcome to Principal Matters Podcast. Why don't you fill in the gaps in that intro and tell listeners something else they may be surprised to know about you?
Yeah, interestingly enough, I have, first of all, thank you for having me today. And I think the one thing is that I was a kid in high school that did absolutely nothing in high school. I was not involved in anything. I did nothing. I had my group of friends, and so the last thing I wanted to do is be at a school at any event of any kind. And yet it is so part of my core now about engagement with kids that I use it all the time of I was that kid who did nothing, and just the experiences potentially that I lost by not doing it and not becoming engaged. So
That's so funny. I was just telling my son yesterday because I worked in schools. Now I do this job, and most of this work I do virtually or sometimes in person. But I was telling him that when I was a young man, I just wanted to be outside all the time. And I could never imagine having a job in a building. I grew up on a farm.
yeah,
And so, Paul, you can never like look through the lens and see what's coming up. But who would have ever thought that somebody who quote unquote was doing nothing in high school, that's your whole life now is leading students into great experiences at high school. And let me give a little more context. Jason Jadamski, who's a good friend of mine, has been on my show. We are colleagues here in the Oklahoma area, but he travels all throughout the U.S. working with schools to increase student engagement. And he reached out to me. He's like, Will, you've got to meet Paul Branagan because here's a man who understands student engagement. So I just wanted to set that stage.
oh,
Anything else you want to fill in there?
yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Well, you have led your school for a very, very long time. And I want to talk about some of those lessons here in just a moment. But
Mhm.
first of all, let's talk about your school. What are some of the outcomes that you're most proud of at Middleborough High School?
Yeah, it's our school is really a quite a special place. The community is we have families that can trace their lineage right back to the Mayflower. It is really quite a unique little town, and we have a population of about 750 students. And it really has become a really close-knit school community that, students may not like going to math class or like that English test, but they really do love coming into their building. And I think that's part of why I think it is something that we have cultivated for quite some time. We were a school that really had a lot of struggle. And I think the teachers in the building that have been here for some time had said we really were not going to allow our school to be in that position again. We were almost taken over by the state. It really just was not in a good spot. and that we've really have really, to lack of better, transformed a school that our students and our teachers and our community can be proud of. Do we have a lot of work to do? Sure. Are we the number one school in the state? Absolutely not. But we have really worked hard to create an experience for kids that we think that once they become engaged and they feel like school matters, then school tend to kind of makes sense. And if it makes sense, they're going to become even more engaged and do better. And so that's something that we really work at.
I love that. 750 school students,
Mm.
912.
Yep.
And, I served as an assistant principal in a school with about 1,400, but as a site principal at a school with 750.
Mm.
And I love, and I'm not suggesting that size doesn't always make the biggest difference, but in a school that size, you really can know everyone.
Right.
And there's such a strong sense of community there too. So I want to pull the curtains back because you have not only been a principal there for a very long time, but you have been directly involved in the student council work that's been going on there. So I just want you to share with listeners what are the practical ways that you've been able to, over time, to invest in student agency, specifically with your student leadership?
Sure. Somebody, when I became the principal 14 years ago, we had a art teacher who is now long retired. And he came into my office and he said to me, he's like, Paul, he goes, can I give you some advice? And I said, sure. And he said, I really want to make sure that you treat the faculty like you treat student council. And I never forgot that. And so I really think that with kids, that it is really about giving them the ownership of the school and really having, we talk a lot about student voice. There's all these articles about the importance of it. But when students really believe that their voice really does matter, it is really quite a powerful experience. And I think being able to really cultivate that as a student council. We have an open student council that anybody who wants to be in it can be a part of it. And so out of the school of 750 students, that our student council has over 250 students that are a part of it.
Wow.
And so they come to meetings, they're active in the activities, and they just feel like they're a piece of the puzzle. And when you have that, then that cultivates that anybody can become engaged with that. The only students who are elected are the ones who want to be an officer because we feel like if you want to have that title, you need to walk the walk and talk the talk. But for students who just want to be a part of it, it is really that's an important factor of it. And I think it gives them ownership of their school. It's about how they decide everything from a spirit week to really helping design really initiatives in the building. And I think that over the years, that has just been something we have always done. And when I transitioned into the principalship, it was something I had asked the district about maintaining the work with student council. And they were so gracious to say, you can keep it as long as you want it. And I have help. I have advisors that work with me. But to be able to sit at a table with students and talk about what is working in a school, but more importantly, what isn't working in a school, and then knowing the fact that they're a part of that solution potentially, it can be really quite powerful.
Wow. 250 approximately students that are involved in student council. Of course, you elect officers. It's more than 30% of your student population. So, like, if I was to walk your school, 3 out of every 10 kids is showing up to ask, what can I do? How
Yeah.
can I help? What are the initiatives? What's going on with our own school? Um, how do you, so again, I love nuts and bolts. So talk a little bit about, I know you share that responsibility with other teachers. I'm sure those students lead to. Take us into some of those moments of how do you facilitate the kind of feedback that you want with that many students involved?
Mm. So there's a lot of different ways. The one thing that I do religiously every month is a temperature check of the school. And it is just a Google survey that I send out to all the students. And I ask them just questions about how they're doing. I ask about their sense of belonging in a school, things they would like to share with me, anything. And sometimes I'll kind of cater a survey based upon what I'm getting vibes of in the building. So if I'm feeling the fact that there's a undercurrent in the school potentially, or I've gotten some feedback from students that there's a challenge that's there, I will then kind of cater the questions towards that. And then many times, what I will do with all the responses that I will get is that I respond to all of the students who reply to it, because I think it's important that when they are giving their feedback for something, whether it's good or not so good, that they're actually getting the feedback to say that I've read it, I've replied to it, I've helped maybe solve the problem. If there was simply a simple question that maybe they were asking, because the final question is always, is there anything you'd like to share with me, anything you need, or anything I can help with? And that sometimes I'll get the question about what's for lunch to, I'm really having a trouble with a class and I'd love to be able to have some support. And then, being able to put them in the right direction. A lot of that information that I will collect, I'm then bringing back to the various teams throughout the building. So it's going to our leadership team, it's going to our counseling team. But more importantly, I'm taking it to the student leaders in the school. Last year, in some of the feedback that I had received, that there was a lot of concern about belonging in the high school. And really, that do they may belong on a football team if they're the football player, they feel like they belong there, or they're in their favorite class, so they belong there. But when they're in other parts of their school building, do they not really feel that same sense of belonging? So that really became a concern for me, and we brought it to the adults in the building, and they had their feedback and they had their ideas. But when you put it into the hands of the students, their feedback was really quite more telling. And we did it through our leadership team and student council, so the executive board into the membership. But then, really, I have a group that is called the Principals Roundtable. And that group is representation of not just the student council leadership, but it's leadership of every organization in the school and also athletics. And so you have voice from very, very different stakeholders in a building that are now representing their organization. And really the charge for them being a president of our theater program or a president of our key club, that they're responsible for making sure that they have a pulse of their membership. So when they're coming to these meetings, that there's an opportunity for them to really share, well, this is what we're feeling or what we're experiencing. And I did a protocol with them about belonging and really what does it look like, smell like, taste like, and really having them really unpack that and give a real calibration to really who we are as a school. And we had some really good entry points. It really validated the good work that everyone is trying to do here and also exposed some areas that while we may think that everyone walks into the building feeling like they're a part of the team, that we also had some work to do in that area as well.
Paul, that's so practical, and anyone that listens to my show knows I love to summarize. So if if I was just listening to this show, I would be pulling over my car right now or grabbing my notebook right now, and I would be writing down the following things, which is how am I taking the temperature of my school on a normal basis and asking some common questions like, how are you doing? What do you want me to know? What are some specific challenges that you feel like we're facing? And then how can you provide that feedback to your teams, your leadership, your counselors, and then back to the students? This is what you all are saying. And then let's collaboratively begin to think through, okay, if belonging is something that was identified in the feedback, how do we begin to just have those conversations? What does belonging look like? What does it feel like? And then what are some intentional things we can do to engage more students? Sometimes I think of it this way, Paul, especially when we've been in school so long, like
Mm,
like you and I. Um, I mean, you've been leading that school for 14 years, which means that for 14 years you've rinsed and repeated school year after school year. But those students, those ninth graders have been there 1 year,
right.
and those 10th, 11th, and 12th graders have only been there the number of times they've been there. So what we might assume sometimes are just ingrained norms, sometimes we lose sight of
Mm.
how we're changing or what are the things that are coming up that are so important to students. What are some specific I mean, the conversations I think are so rich. Awareness is really big too. I'm curious if there's any other actions you guys have taken as a result of just that area of belonging to try to bring students into a place where they feel more centered at school.
Yeah. So we really, it was interesting. Some of the feedback we had received that I think the adults in the building went in a direction that there was this crisis. So we needed to react and this is what we need to do. But then when you got the feedback from students and really you got them to really start talking, that you realize that really this is not, we really were not in a crisis. What we needed to do was recalibrate what we're doing. and really making sure that we're being relevant and that we're being responsive. And so really a lot of the things that we started to do was really look at certain areas of the school that really was about really the kind of feel of the school building. And so we did a lot of intentional work this spring in particular about really having an assessment done of our school culture and our climate, but really having it be something where our students really were able to give the context of really what's the good work that they need to be doing. Because we can have all the teachers doing all the things. They can be standing at the door greeting, they can stand at the door as kids are leaving. And we do a lot of work on that level as well, creating the environment in the room, because we know the fact that if students can walk into a classroom and they feel a sense of calm, they feel a sense of belonging in the room, they're a part of it, there's a connection, then we know learning will happen and powerful learning will happen. So we really do a lot of work there, but then we also have to put the energy into the students. So what does our cafeteria look like? What does our fan section look like? Are we only showing up for our football game, but all of our soccer teams are not getting the response? Or what happens when it's our theater performance in an evening? Are we getting the students to really become that we're all in this together and we got to support one another? And so it allowed for them to kind of do their own calibration, which is then for me as a principal, I always say to them that it's your school and my job is to guide you in the direction you want to go. And yes, there's things we must do, but at the end of the day, the environment that you want for your school really has to come from you.
You're just reminding me of a really powerful conversation I had with a friend who is very invested in student leadership too. And he said to me back at the beginning of the school year, one of his goals, and I had never had a friend put it this way, one of his goals was to dismantle his own power. I was like, okay, what do you mean by that? And he's like, well, I want my students and my teachers and my staff to own this school so that I'm facilitating their work. And Paul, that's exactly what you're describing. Um, before I change gears, I want to give you another opportunity. You guys have been recognized a lot too for the work of your student council, and you have too. Tell us a little bit about what some of the things that have happened that have brought you guys that kind of attention.
Yeah. So we've been very fortunate of our students of really being proud of where they come from and proud of their school. And so we've been really quite fortunate with some training we're able to provide other schools or my work with the state association as the executive director to be able to work with schools all over the state about really how to create everything from an open student council that when you have students that oftentimes are just elected, then sometimes they're students that really are not into it to make a difference. They're into it to have it on a resume. And that when you can really open it up to kids who potentially are not the ones who would be the ones getting all the votes, it's a real game changer. And so really helping with that as well. But more importantly, it's really helping really schools really do some assessment around what their culture and their climate, truly is. And so being able to, work with states and work around our state, around the country with doing that, that our student council has had the good fortune of being recognized for really outstanding leadership and really outstanding work in of making a school a better place.
What I love about your story too, Paul, is you guys are committed to practices that involve student leadership. You're committed to connecting with schools across your state. You guys have become, in so many ways, a model for schools. And yet at the same time, and this is how we got connected, you weren't satisfied. You're like, nope, we've got to get deeper. So tell us a little bit about why you connected with Jason's group, for instance.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that you were anticipating by bringing in some additional support for your students to build spirit and voice?
Yeah, I always think that we may think it's as you said, the wash, rinse, and repeat. And yes, I have a bucket of things that we can do and all of that. But I also feel that when you can bring somebody in from the outside that can really help you do a needs assessment and maybe ask critical questions that I may not want to ask or could ask, but then more importantly, allowing students to be able to share with someone else, this is who we are as a school, but also through that, identifying the areas that we really needed some support with. And I'll give an example to that. we really were struggling in my phone is ringing right now. I'm sorry.
Um,
That we were in our fan section was really not really what we wanted it to be. And we would say that we really had a lot of spirit, but halfway through the game, half the kids would leave. And we were also doing more cheering for the other team negatively than we were for ourselves. And it really bothered me. And I think that when we had the ability to have that become one of our assessment areas to say, look, we may have a lot of things going on here, but when we get down to really the brass, tacks of it, are we really doing what we say we are? So we can go out there and say, this is who we are, this is what we do. But then at the end of the day, we may have a beautiful looking home out front, but don't open a closet or a drawer when you walk in. And that really is what we ended up doing, is doing that spring cleaning to say, who are we? What do we want to be? And who do we want to be? And so I'll tell you that the students really took to that, and our fan section in particular at games have become quite the thing. And it is really quite fun to see when you see the flip of going from really students that are really cheering for our school and for each other, kids that are staying from beginning to end. It has been unbelievable, the reaction to that. And that's what I mean about when you empower students to do it and you give them the ingredients to make it happen. I think it just makes the job of an educational leader, of a principal, of an administrator to make it so much easier because you're partnering with them rather than feeling like you're dragging them to say we need something to be done and yet they don't even know where to begin. But when you give them the ingredients and the tools to do it, it becomes a complete game changer.
oh, I love that. Thank you for that. And for anyone that's listening and you're like, wait a second, I need that kind of
Mm.
revisit or recalibration. And Jason had no idea I was going to be plugging
Yeah,
him in this interview, but we'll gladly put Jason's
you bet.
contact information in my show notes for Ignite to Unite. He's been a guest on my show before, and I love that story because I've heard it so many other times too. And I won't name any names, but if when I go to football games or basketball games, I'll watch the student sections. And Paul, you're so right. Sometimes you see them really fired up to talk against a team, but when they get fired up to talk to their team,
Mm.
that energy is so contagious, and people stay. Kids want to be there, and they're building community, and it's even more beautiful when they show up for volleyball or
Yeah.
softball or drama, and they do those same things. So if you're listening to this and you're like, man, I want to revisit some of those same practices, then just check the show notes for that link.
Yeah.
I also want, while I have you in the room, I have a lot of listeners who are, historically have listened to the show for a long time as principals, assistant principals, some of them now assistant superintendents, directors. But I hear also from aspiring leaders that will listen to the show because they're stepping into leadership and they want a place where they can find some resources. So, could you talk to that aspiring or maybe newer leader? What are some pieces of advice that you would give that person as they're stepping in, just to keep in mind if they want to build the kind of, um, I'm just going to say it, the kind of legacy, Paul, that you've built? Where would you encourage them to begin?
Yeah, I think often about when you look at administration period that sometimes there's a lot of movement that happens and an administrator will stay someplace for a period of time and then they will move to another place and I think for an aspiring leader, you ultimately have to find your home, and I think when you find that and you know the fact that you're in a place that you can grow as a professional, as a leader, that you're going to be challenged by the people around you to be better. And I know I say challenged, I think that is a good way because in leadership, you need to be challenged to grow in whatever role you're playing. And I think for an aspiring leader who wants to lead a school, and everyone wants to lead a great school, that you have to be able to go into it and really almost um, have this mission for yourself that this is more than just simply a job. And I think how that looks for people could be really different. But, I always say to students, you'll never work a day in your life when you do something you love. And I think when you go into this work, there are days that are not so great. But I would say to you that when you can walk out into your common areas at the end of a school day after a tough day or going into a game and you see the environment that is there, it gives you the shot in the arm to just know the fact that you're doing the right work. And that I
I
would
love
think would be
that.
the big thing for an aspiring leader. And the other one would be is to really listen to your students.
You said several things there that are really powerful. finding a place that you can make your home. And I think it was Jimmy Casas who I first heard put it this way when he was like talking to leaders and said to them, "You guys realize you're building a learning community. This isn't just a school; it's a community,
Right.
and it's a learning. So make finding that place where you can say, I'm building something here that's going to be my home. Two, welcoming those challenges as an invitation to improve, and by welcoming, Paul, what I hear you say is invite that feedback. Tell me where I can grow from my teachers, from my staff. Recognize it's more than a job; it's a calling,
Yep.
and then pull in those students. I always like to say, show me your calendar to new leaders. When are you going to be spending time with your teachers, maybe those other leaders within your school, but then show me where you're spending time with students
Right.
because you need their feedback too. Um, let's talk to the veteran leader because all of us know we have seasons in this work
Mm.
and we're doing this work sustainably. Some years are higher, some years are lower, but what would you say to that leader who's like, I want to finish strong? What would you say to him or her?
Yeah, I think for the veteran administrator and leader, I really do think that sometimes, and even, I've been very fortunate to be in the same school my whole career, and I've been asked sometimes, would you ever go somewhere else? And I think I'd go work in a bank because this is really where it means this is where the work is for me. But I always say, even being in the same place, you have to calibrate yourself constantly about really where you are in the journey of it because I really deeply believe that when you get out of bed in the morning and you are making your way to school, are entering the building with excitement for the new day, it's a fresh start, or is there a sign of or dread? And I think sometimes as we get deeper and deeper into our years, especially now in this profession, that I think sometimes the fact that the things that aren't so great right now maybe is really becomes more of the forefront rather than why we got into this work in the first place. And I think for me, it is the more that I can be in around students. Like I never miss a lunch. So I will clear my schedule every day and I will be in that cafeteria. I walk around with a barrel and I go to every table taking the trash and my custodian's like, you don't need to be doing that. But it's so much more than just simply that. It is about putting eyes on every single kid, saying hello to them every day. You're able to calibrate where they are, how they're doing. You can see that kid who you saw the day before with a smile on her face or his face, and the next day they're not. And you're able to kind of do a little bit of a check in on that. And I think it just allows for you to be completely submerged. So when the times aren't really going so great, or you really have that bad day, you can walk into that student, center, that common area, and just know that everything is okay.
Oh my gosh, Paul, so much wisdom. Recalibrate constantly, enter every day with a purpose, and then being visible and present with your students. There's so much power in that. And there's so many things that I know leaders are asked to do. But those things that you just reminded us of were all built around staying connected to your culture, staying connected to the feedback, and recognizing that it's that you're also modeling service too. I know your custodians are like scolding you for walking around
Right.
helping kids put away their trash, but one, you're saving time and
Hmm.
you're showing them a good practice, but two, you're modeling service to your students as well. I know we're going to wrap this conversation up here in the next couple of minutes, but I didn't want to do that without giving you an opportunity to speak to anything else that has been important to you in your work as a leader. And then I want listeners to know how they can connect with you.
Yeah, I think, I've always found that this profession is not a career. It's really a vocation, I think. And I think to do it well, it is a commitment. And I think that educators around the country know that and they live that. And I think something for me that is really important is really just about um, really the engagement of a community as well. That your school is only going to be as good as it is if you don't have the ability to have your community support it and to have your family support it when you're asking kids to come to a meeting at 7 o'clock at night or you're having these events or whatever it may be, that it's really about having the connection of really not only what's happening inside the school, but also what is happening outside of the school and really the invitation of coming in to the building. And I think that's really the important part, but also the branding of a school. We call this place a home. And you can hear the kids say it, you hear parents say it. And I think the more that that is just the messaging you're putting out there, and it's not messaging for the just simply the tagline, that you really believe it and you live it, I think it really just becomes just part of the fabric of a community.
Paul, I've said this to other friends and leaders too, but when you think about this work as a vocation, and I'm not saying anything to leaders that they don't feel, but I just want to say it out loud. Because I have friends who are in ministry, or they do pastoral work, or they do some kind of work in a mission setting. And for me, a principal is the closest thing I can think of to that kind of connection to the community, that kind of connection to the people that you're serving. And so thank you for the commitment you've had to that vocation for your school community. How can listeners stay connected with you if they want to find out more about your high school, if they want to connect with what's going on with your student council, or if they just want to become your friend?
Yeah, so they can reach out to me through the Middleborough High School website and get my email and of course social media and all of them. It would be it would be great to stay connected with people and to learn from other people. I just like when you mentioned JJ, being able to collaborate with him and to stay in contact and it builds your network, and then also you never stop learning. So
I love that. Well, Paul Branagan, you have been leading into student leadership there at your wonderful high school, Middleborough High School in Middleborough, Massachusetts. And Principal Matters listeners will put a link to Paul's contact information, his email address, and the show notes. And you got to hear my dog probably jump into the conversation too. But until next time, thank you so much for doing What Matters. We'll talk to you again soon. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, would you take a moment and like, share, subscribe, or leave us a review? In fact, if you share it out with a friend, even more people can become a part of these conversations. Sign up for our newsletter at williamdparker.com for even more free resources. And don't forget to check out our website to learn more about our books, professional development offerings, Grow Academies, masterminds, executive coaching, and keynote presentations. Wow, let's keep learning together. And thank you for doing what matters.
Principal Matters.